A series of wars began in the 4th century BC, which enabled Rome to expand from the center of the Italian peninsula throughout the entire Mediterranean region. The Gauls invaded Rome in the 4th century, but the Roman military under the command of General Camillus drove the Gauls out of Italy. Upon the Roman victory, Camillus remarked, quote, "With iron, not with gold, Rome buys her freedom." After their victories against the Gauls and Pyrrhus, king of Epirus of Greece, Rome was able to seize control of the entire Italian mainland and looked to expand into the neighboring island of Sicily. It is here where Rome would come into conflict with arguably its most historically significant rival, another empire which also sought to take control of the Mediterranean: Carthage. Carthage and Rome would fight each other not once, not twice, but 3 times in a series of conflicts known as the Punic Wars. This series of wars lasted from 264 BC with the First Punic War to the third ending in 146 BC, over 100 years of wars against Carthage. Rome was able to claim Sicily at the end of the first, but by the end of the third, Rome had crushed Carthage into non-existence, and in the process, expanded its territories into the regions of Hispania and North Africa. Now, we have some good news and some bad news. The good news is, with the defeat of Carthage, Macedonia, and the Seleucid empires, Rome had established itself as a significant world superpower in the Mediterranean. The bad news is, it would mark the beginning of the fall of the Republic. As Rome spread throughout the Mediterranean, naturally, it also expanded its power and culture throughout the Republic. Rome was getting larger, and thus needed ways to connect the Republic together. Even with the highly trained and disciplined Roman legions, keeping the peace throughout its territories was a pretty daunting task. This is where Rome's impressive architecture comes in. All roads lead to Rome, as the saying goes, and the advent of concrete enabled the Romans to build a network of roads, such as the Appian Way, which finished construction in 264 BC. With its massive network of roads, Roman legions could quickly traverse long distances whenever and wherever they were needed. Roads also enabled the Roman economy to grow exponentially, for trade goods and supplies could easily be transported across the empire. As its roads spread, so too did other forms of architecture, many of which can still be seen today. Aqueducts brought water and sanitation to cities throughout Rome's territories. Amphitheaters featured plays and gladiatorial games, and temples devoted to Rome's pagan gods dotted the empire. As Rome physically grew in size, the amount of political unrest in the Senate increased as well. The victory against Carthage was both a blessing and a curse for Rome's republic. Rome may have grown richer from the spoils of war, but the Senate could not figure out what to do with them. Arguments, and sometimes outright violence, broke out between senators and social classes. This political unrest would ultimately lead to the Republic's fall. A pair of Roman tribunes by the names of Gaius Gracchus and Tiberius Gracchus attempted to reform land legislation in favor of the plebeians, but unfortunately, they were assassinated for their efforts. While the Senate was distracted with infighting, slave revolts, and piracy in the Mediterranean Sea, military reforms enabled generals to rise to prominence and power outside of the Senate's authority. General Gaius Marius led a reform which was unheard of for the time. Citizens who were poor and homeless could join the army, and thus the army's loyalties shifted from the Senate to their commanding officers. In 82 BC, a rival commanding general named Sulla seized control for himself and ruled with absolute power as a dictator. With the power of the legions behind Sulla, the Senate could do nothing to stop him. During this dictatorship, social conditions in Rome went from bad to worse. Rome's population had split into 2 political divisions, the populares and the Optimates. The rich aristocracy hoarded most of the wealth, leaving the lower classes poor and impoverished. When Sulla stepped down as dictator in 79 BC, he left Rome a social and economic mess. Sulla's abdication made way for younger military leaders to step forward and take control. Enter some familiar faces. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, or Pompey, Marcus Licinius Crassus, and last but not least, Gaius Julius Caesar. Caesar, who distinguished himself as a prominent military leader during his campaigns in Spain, was a rising star in Rome. He was not only a seasoned commander, but also a skilled orator and politician. Taking advantage of the political turmoil, Caesar seized power by bringing Pompey and Crassus together to form an alliance known as the First Triumvirate. Unfortunately, this triumvirate did not last long, for Julia, Caesar's daughter and wife of Pompey, died in childbirth. Crassus, who had acted as a mediator between Caesar and Pompey, was killed in 53 BC during his invasion of Parthia. Without Crassus to be there as the voice of reason in the triumvirate, Caesar and Pompey eventually turned against one another and became political rivals. Seeking more power and fame for himself, Caesar invaded Gaul, thus earning him a hero status to the legions and the Roman people. Pompey, now Caesar's arch-rival, could do nothing to stop Caesar's armies, and after the famous crossing of the Rubicon River, Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was murdered in 48 BC. Over the next few years, Caesar stamped out what little political opposition was left, and ultimate power in Rome was now his for the taking. In February 44 BC, the Senate begrudgingly named Caesar as perpetual dictator over all of Rome. Many Optimates in the Senate feared that Caesar would personally overthrow the Republic and re-establish a monarchy. Optimates took matters into their own hands, and on March 15, 44 BC, the Ides of March, Julius Caesar was assassinated. Did this coup work? Nope. It backfired hard, and Rome was plunged into a series of civil wars. The Optimates in the Senate had hoped that killing Caesar would restore the Senate's power back in Rome. However, fate had other plans. Mark Antony, who was a good friend and colleague of Caesar's, formed a second triumvirate, together with Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. The second triumvirate ultimately got revenge against Caesar's conspirators, but, like the first triumvirate, this one did not last either. Relations between Antony and Octavian diminished when Antony became a little too involved with a certain Egyptian queen. Octavian viewed Antony's alliance with Queen Cleopatra as an act of treason, and after Antony's defeat at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide, bringing an end to the civil wars and ushered in the beginning of a new era for Rome. Octavian changed his name to Augustus and became Rome's first emperor. The reign of the emperors had begun.